Hello. We should be live now, so I can present to our viewers our next guest. I'm very happy to see Tove Alsterdal. Do I spell it right?
Yes, absolutely.
Tove Alsterdal from Sweden, the author of the book we just published. Of course, this is a mirror view. Ślepy tunel in Polish, blind tunnel in Swedish,
Yes.
right?
Yes,
Okay.
your Swedish is very good.
Oh, thank you. And Erasure, as it was published in English-speaking countries, right?
Yeah.
And before we will talk about the book, I wanted to say a few words about you as the author. And to my a bit surprise, I found out that the first book you published, you wrote actually, was, I would say, quite late. I mean, not in the beginning of your career. You were a journalist. You cooperated with Lisa Marklut as an editor of her books. And then you decided to write your first book, and then you continue writing. The Blind Tunnel is your fourth or fifth book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The fifth one, yeah.
If you could tell us a bit about your career and what made you to write books by yourself.
I always had the plan as a writing person. I've been a journalist, and I've also been writing plays for theater and film and so on, scripts. And I always thought that I would write a book sometime, but you know, have 3 kids, no one pays you to do that, and it takes a while. And it wasn't until I got this idea that became the book Women on the Beach that I felt that I had to write this book now, immediately. It was too good to just let go or postpone until someone gave me the money and the time. No one ever gives you the money and the time. You just have to do it. And it was rather late, but I was busy writing other stuff, but that had to be a novel. So then I started, and I found out that I really liked it. It really suited me well.
And the book was successful. It was put into the movie, right? I haven't seen it.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. No.
No, it wasn't.
The rights were sold, and they tried it for a long time, but it actually wasn't a movie.
So
yeah, but it was published in like 20 countries or something, I think. So.
Mm-hmm. But then I read that another of your book is being under production, right? And
yes.
And the Polish cinema photographer and director Janusz Kamiński is behind that project. Is it still?
This became a bit complicated because that project isn't one of my books. It's actually one of Lisa Marklund's books.
Oh, okay.
Yes, but I've been editor and we worked a little bit on it. So that's
are you working with that as a screenwriter, or what is your role?
I did. Yes, I had to think now. I keep forgetting what I've been doing. Yes, me and Lisa Marklund wrote the first drafts together to that film. It was based on a novel she wrote together with James Patterson, the American author, Postcard Killings. But that had actually been released. That movie has been released, but there was just a scriptwriter. Now we're trying to make one of my books into TV series, but it's pre-production and Corona time, so we never know when we're going to see it.
Okay, I keep my fingers crossed.
Yes.
You wrote that book, which is new for our viewers, for our readers, because it just came out. You wrote that as a thriller, but actually I see a lot more behind that. There is a crime, but what is more important for me is the whole story about Sudetach and people who live there. And I'm wondering what made you write about this subject? How did you come into this region? Because I guess you must have known some more about that.
Yes, as you said, it's like Sudeten, Germany, and so it takes place in Czechia. And I've been quite a lot to Czechia. I haven't been to Poland. I really wish I could be there instead of just doing this online.
Much better, yes.
But I've been a lot in Czechia also before the wall came down and so on. And I just came across this story that just like grabbed me. And it's hard to tell why when you see a story, why you want to write that particular story, but I just couldn't resist it. And it was just, I met a new friend, and he asked him about his last name that sounded a bit German. And he told me about his grandparents, who were among those 3 million who were expelled from Sudeten Germany in the end of the Second World War. And I thought it was such a dramatic story. It was such a huge story, and it hasn't been told. I mean, of course, some people who know lots about history know about it. But when I started, I was a bit ashamed that I knew so little when I heard about it. And I started to do some research and read, and I found out that almost no one in Sweden knew about this. And in Czechia, no one talks about it. It's still a lot about, I mean, in Germany, they don't talk about it very much either. It's like one of those hidden stories that hasn't been really told after the World War II. I mean, lots of stories from the World War II we have heard for years, and in different stories and different films, movies, books. But this particular story hasn't really been told that much. And when I found those hidden stories, I just can't resist digging into them, because I mean, you get hijacked by the story. And I really wanted to, I wanted to tell the story. What happened to those people? What happened just when the World War II had ended? And I mean, you have similar stories in Poland, of course, with the German-speaking people who were expelled. But this was also like the beginning of World War II, when Hitler in October 1938.
Right, that was the
election. It was in the end there in my mind. 1938, in the Munich conference in Munich, when Hitler demanded to get the Sudeten Germany, or the Sudeten land, as you can say as well. And the England and France just gave it to him, thinking that, well, he will be satisfied if he just get this. And Chamberlain went home and said, I've guaranteed peace in our time. And we all know that it didn't really came out that way. But I knew, that story I knew, how it started. But what happened to those people afterwards? It was that story that has been so little told.
Actually, I think there is not much talked about that in Poland either.
It's not,
because of course, if we talk about that past, it's more in the context what happened to the Jewish people. There is no many people who want to talk about what happened with the German people who were living here, and they were not supporting Hitler. Like a regular German people from the villages, for whom that was also the tragedy in the Second World War. And what I found out from the book was even more surprising, that area that then was divided into the Czech and Polish in Poland, and still a little bit belongs to Germany. So it was divided into three countries. Was in the past just Sudetenland, and people living there didn't consider themselves a special nation. The Germans lived with Czechs, and they didn't differentiate themselves. They were in the best cooperation, I would say.
Yes, they have lived there for 1,000 years, when they were invited actually by the Bohemian kings. So they have never lived in Germany. I mean, they have lived there in Bohemia for 1,000 years. And I found out when I did research that there's even a tradition, very widespread tradition. I've met people who had been into this when they were kids, that they used to exchange kids among the Czech and the German families to get the children to be bilingual, because I mean that was good to be able to speak both languages. And so a Czech kid could live in a German family for half a year or a summer or something, and vice versa. The German kid could stay in the Czech family, and they became friends for life and called each other mother and father and so on. And from going from that to starting to kill each other, it's like I think that process was very interesting to study too. What made those neighbors that really didn't see themselves particular as German or Czech. They were Catholics or Protestants or lived in that village or that part of the village. And lots of them were married. They were like lots of marriages. I mean, they lived for 1,000 years. And maybe they spoke Czech at home and German at work and so on. So it was really tough when they were starting to like divide them, nationalists, to say who was what. It wasn't that easy. People often didn't know. So they have to like try to define it. Who are German and who are Czech? If you speak German a little bit more, maybe you are German. Or if your father are German, then you are German. But if your mother is German, then you are maybe Czech and so on. So it wasn't that easy. But I mean, going from that to like what happened later is like it's in about 50 years or something. That's a big tragedy.
A lot of people in that times were bilingual, thanks to that.
Yes.
Yeah. And then the years of nationalism came. Not just in Germany. We know about the nationalism in the 30s.
Czechoslovakia was
and in
very
Poland as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I mean, when Nazi Germany took the Sudetenland or Bohemia, actually, sometimes they really preferred to deal with the Czechs because they were so nationalistic and so wanted their parades and everything. And those Sudeten Germans, lots of them just wanted to stay at home, take care of the kids, and they absolutely did not want to go to war. Lots of them voted to join Germany, and lots of them supported the German regime, but mainly because they want to help against the Czechs, not that they wanted to go to the Eastern Front.
Yeah, because if they spoke German, no wonder they chose Germany, because that was at least this is what they thought that was their country if they had to choose, right?
Yeah.
But I found in your book one sentence that was also surprising, that they were Sudeten Germans who didn't become Germans. So my question is, who they became, if not the Germans?
No, I'm not sure if I understand the question.
Yeah, there was someone mentioned in their book that when pointing for some people that these were the Sudeten Germans who didn't become the Germans. So you must found, you don't recall that?
I actually don't. I'm trying to recall it, but I really don't. I mean, they were Sudeten Germans. They were citizens of Czechoslovakia until they were expelled. So it depended on where they ended up. I mean, some ended up in Germany and some ended up in Sweden and so on. Mm-hmm. So I mean, there were. No, I'm not sure. We'll just leave it because I really can't recall. It's always hard because when you publish a book abroad, sometimes you forget the details because it's been a couple of years, and now I've written a new book here. So.
Okay. But I was still wondering, how are these villages nowadays? Because I guess you must have visited a lot of Sudeten villages in this particular region.
Yeah, and that was part of the, why I got so interested, because it was also this landscape. Because I mean, just like a minute after World War II had ended, they started to just throw out the whole German population, 3 million. And I thought, what happened? Just a very, very few were left there or got the permission to stay. A few that they really wanted their skills, or who had proved that they really had fought the Nazi regime. But lots who proved they had fought the Nazi regime were expelled as well. And so what happens to this landscape when you have totally erased a culture? It's been a culture for 1,000 years when they have lived there together. and then totally wipe it out almost overnight in a few months' time. And because just to see the traces in the landscape, and the traces are there when you walk around and travel around those villages, you can see, I mean, the graveyards are really touching, because I mean it's graveyards somewhere in the outskirts of the village that has just been left behind since 1945. No one has been there to like care for the graves, so they just like broken and fallen down, and lots of grass over. And there are signs you can see in the facades. There are like, you can see like shady signs in German, because they changed all the signs and so on into Czech, of course, but you can still see it. And the people I talked to has like, no one has told the kids people who have lived there since 1945, those who were kids then and didn't know what happened. No one has told them. They haven't spoken a word about it in Czechoslovakia and later Czechia. So I even got letters from Czech people in Sweden who said that, oh, now I understand what I didn't see when I was a kid, or what I saw but didn't understand, because no one told me why that church was closed and suddenly used for something else, so you like just left behind, and those like signs you could see parts of. So she really thanked me. Well, now I understand what really happened, or what it really was. And that's really fascinating, because you can't really erase a culture. It's still there in a way, but like it's gone.
Yeah. And I guess a lot of things happened during the war and after the war, of which people still don't really want to talk about. They are too hard experience they've been through, right?
Yeah. And also, I mean, in Czechia, it's like not even, people don't talk about it at all. The book hasn't been published in Czechia. I don't know if it will. No Czech publisher has bought it. I mean, it's really something you don't talk about. There are like young historians who have started to like try and document the history before everyone is dead who can remember and so on. But that's just a few. And of course, with this story, the problem with this story, and as you say, it hasn't really been told in Poland either. It's that here the Germans were actually victims. And the story about World War II is that the Germans were the perpetrators. And we know that story. But I mean, the ordinary old woman in the farm, was she really the perpetrator? Or maybe she was also the victim of this oppressive regime, but in a different way. And I mean, now it's this moment when it turns after the war, and it turns and the victims become perpetrators and so on. That interests me, because I mean, we are all people. It's not that this group of people, maybe not all of them are evil and all of the rest of us are good. Maybe it's like a little bit more complicated.
Right. And we've been through the communist times, so we've been told for years, that was the policy of the Korean government, that the Germans in general were bad and the Soviets were good. So of course, for last 30 days, we are revealing the true facts from these years.
Yes.
And I wonder, because I've also read that you did some investigation, you did some research. Was it difficult for you to dig into these past events, or how was it?
I was surprised. I just had to bend down here to get my... I was surprised that there was so little written. I mean, I don't read German or Czech, so I have to read in English. And there are things published, but not that much if you compare to everything else during the World War II, where it's so much. I mean, lots of things that have been published about it. But I mean, there have been like researchers writing about it and dig into it. So there are lots of material, and I could meet people and talk to them. As I said, there are like young historians in Prague that have started this project to starting to interview people. So through them, I could find like people who could talk about it, and also like the last Sudeten German in one village. His grandfather was the only one remaining in the village, and still he is regarded as the stranger in the village. It's even though they have been the family has been there for like 1,000 years. So it wasn't really difficult. I can't say there are always people to talk to, and there are, but so I could find people to talk to and like get what I needed to write it. But of course I have to do a lot of research, because I mean I haven't lived there myself, so I have to like really go into it and understand it all. And I also always use those parts. I mean, this is also a crime story, and the crime story is fiction, but that's what happens today, present time in the book. But these things that took place then, I want them to be true. This really happened, maybe not exactly to those people or exactly in this village, but it did happen.
And has the book been published in Germany?
No, they postponed it because they really want to do something like big of it, because they really they really love it. So it should be published now in September, but they postponed it for a year because they didn't want to take the risk that it came into the Corona shadow. But I'm really looking forward to see what happens in Germany.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see what will be the discussion about the book in Germany.
Yeah.
That will be, I guess, a very interesting discussion.
Yes, I think so too, because there have been those Sudeten Germans who ended up in Germany. There have been some who have like raised their voices and want their homes back and so on, which they never can get. It's in the Czech law. But they have always been regarded as like very, very right-wing, almost Nazis or even Nazis. So the huge majority choose to not speak, to not even mention where they came from, to just, adjust to the new situation wherever they ended up, and just like, get integrated.
But I guess the situation now allows the Germans to go to Sudeten and buy the land or house.
Yeah, they can. Yeah, of course, they can go and buy the land, but they can never reclaim it back. They can never reclaim what was taken from them. But of course, they can, like anyone else, go and buy something on the market. And after '89, they could. When at '89, of course, quite a few of them returned just to look at their homes and the village and what had happened. And there are stories when they like came into their old house and they saw like, there was grandma's cup, or the signs on the sheet and the linen was like from the grandmother or grandfather, and it looked exactly the same. And some family had actually saved, like things, photos, because they could take so little when they left.
Oh yeah. So a lot of these kind of things were left in these houses.
Yes, lots of things. They could take, like, it was different what time they left or was like forced to leave. Some could take like 15 kilos, some could take 50 kilos. But I hardly think anyone could take more than 50 kilos. So you can just start thinking about what, like 50 kilos of, your life, what would you choose to take?
In your book, you present a bookseller who keeps in her cellar, a lot of these kind of remnants from the past. And did you see that yourself, that they were these kind of gatherings of the past?
No, I didn't. That I made up. But when I went there, a lot of those old Bohemian towns have like those medieval tunnels beneath them. I was in Litomerice, where they have like three layers of medieval tunnels where they used to transport and store things during the wars and so on, transport food and guns and things. And so I just thought that would be I just thought it would be a great idea that she has actually, this bookseller, she actually inherits the bookshop. And during those times, there had been so much literature that had been forbidden, different literature in different times. So she has one layer of the, there are those socialist Marxist things that they have to hide during the Nazi era, and the Jewish literature, of course, have one layer in this storage, and all this lots of books that they after the war they could they have the German books that they stored because they were like the books, the Goethe and stuff were just thrown out of the houses, and her grandmother, I think it is, or is it her mother? I don't remember. Goes and picks them up
grandmother.
Preserve them underneath. So she has the forbidden German literature, she has the forbidden Jewish literature, she has this forbidden communist socialist literature, which of course her mother thought that she could lift up later on, but it really didn't happen. And after 89 she thought that, well, now we can sell anything, but then no one wanted to buy it anymore because they just wanted to buy Harry Potter.
Right,
so
right. The similar situation is, I would say, in Poland, and especially in my region, because I live in Silesia.
Yeah?
We have these stories similar with the past as Sudeten.
Yes.
That was the German region in the past.
Yes.
So you can find old German books also in several places.
Yeah. I met this guy who was the last Sudeten German ancestor in, he was the last Sudeten German in the village, and his father, I think it was, had also done this. Had tried to pick up those beautiful books from the streets, not to so he had some of them in his shelf. Yeah, but that's very similar in Silesia.
Yeah.
Should have some novels written there too.
Oh yeah. So you just mentioned the tunnel, of which I wanted to ask you for. So they were really, they are still these kind of tunnels, but it's possible to visit them. They are like a place of
parts
attraction.
of them. In some cities there are parts that you can go down. It's like in Tomerice, they have preserved and made them safe to go down to, and in Jelnik as well there are parts of them that you can see.
So they come from the medieval times?
Yes.
And I guess during the Second World War they were used in
I haven't found that they were used, actually. I don't know really if they were, but in my book they are. But I guess they are, of course. When people have to hide, they find all. Yeah. And there were also, when I went down to those tunnels, it was, a gateway through a restaurant. So it was like in houses that you could get down in those. So I'm sure that people were hiding there. So the private places can enter these kind of tunnels, like the books you mentioned. Yes. Yes, I got in through a restaurant.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. I have to go there to see that myself.
Yes, you have to go there. Yes, it's really interesting.
Because I don't think I haven't heard about these kind of things in the Polish Sudeten.
Okay.
So I wonder, maybe that could be something to investigate in the Polish villages as well.
Yeah, you have to go and dig a little.
Exactly. And when you travel through Sudeten, I guess you were, of course, you were in this Czech part,
yes.
and I guess you went through the German part of Sudeten as well. And what can you say about that? Because someone told me that the Germans they are left only with just a little part of Sudeten, and which is not that beautiful as they say that the beautiful part is on the Czech part.
Yes, it's actually when you cross the border, when you go, especially when you go by train from Dresden and into the Czech Bohemia, it's so beautiful. I don't know if it was a thought that they should keep the best part, but it's really, really beautiful up there in the north. I'm trying to think. I think actually it's a little bit beautiful on the German side as well. But the best, I think you're right. It's the best. It's like, it's called the Bohemian Switzerland because it's so like those mountains and sandstones and everything. It's really beautiful.
and we have also some beautiful parts of Sudeten as well.
Yeah.
And I
And
wanted to
also
ask you about,
Sudetenland wasn't really on the map, so you can't really say exactly where it was, because Sudetenland was actually just a name for those parts of those countries where there was a German-speaking population. So I don't think you really can tell exactly where the borders were.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to ask you about these vineyards idea.
Yeah.
That was
vineyards.
that was quite an interesting thing in the beginning of the book, when people from the north of Europe think about buying vineyards. Normally they think about Spanish or Italian vineyard or French, but that might be more expensive. But this is like the ideal place of moving into, and that was some interesting and original thing that we found in that.
Actually, I had, when I got the idea to write about Sudetenland, I had this idea of a house where the history has passed through. But when I also wanted a Swedish connection, so to also make it into a crime novel, and to have a story in present time. And when I started to research, I found that this was the region where the northernmost vineyards were in the old Europe. I mean, today you can grow wine in Sweden. It's it's a bit different. But back then, 1,000 years ago, those were the most northern, and no one actually thought that they really could grow wine there. But it turned out that on the south banks of Elbe, it was like possible. And really good wine. The Bohemian wine I can recommend it. They started it again. It wasn't that good during communist time. They weren't really the best wine makers.
Because there was no culture of wine in the communist countries.
No. There were two grapes were still allowed, but I mean they socialized the vineyards and kept like 2 grapes, and it had really bad reputation. So I mean, you can go into a wine bar in Prague and ask for Bohemian wine, and they say, "Oh, there you can't find any Bohemian wine. There isn't any Bohemian wine." But I mean, I've been around lots of vineyards in northern Czechia, so I know they are there. But I like this one. It collides this dream of, I mean, this Swedish couple that, I mean, life has been a bit tough and the marriage isn't that good anymore. And what shall they do with the rest of the life when the kids has moved out and so on? And the guy, Daniel, he just searches the net for like, where should I go and start my new life? And they, of course, they would have wanted a vineyard in Provence or Tuscany, but no normal person can buy that. It's very, very expensive. It's absolutely impossible. But he finds this run-down, deserted vineyard in Bohemia, in former Sudetenland. So, which they can buy if they say, I found one actually on the net, so I know what they cost. It wasn't that expensive. They could sell like a small house in Stockholm and buy that. But I wanted this worlds to collide, this romantic dream of the vineyard and to live a better life. It's like a bit naive and very romantic, and you can feel, well, who wouldn't want a vineyard?
Oh yeah.
And then this dark history that they know nothing about when they move there, but of course, which they rather brutally steps on.
Yeah, that was a very brave decision for the Swedish couple to move into Czech part, not knowing the Czech language. Only she knew, let's say German. I don't know what was the quality of her German, but still, he didn't really speak the language.
No.
But anyway, they went to the country of Czech language speaking people.
Yeah.
So that was very brave decision. Most of the people moved into,
Polish.
Most of the people from Czech or Poland, they move into Sweden, not
exactly, not the other way around.
Exactly.
But he has had some troubles, and he really wants to do something different of his life. So I think vineyard, they can restore it. They can have this like Airbnb thing there and maybe start growing wine again. And so, yeah, I could consider doing it actually. I won't.
It sounded like a great idea.
Yeah. I did something similar once. It was like buying a theater. It was like the same thing. It was just as foolish, but it felt like a good idea at the moment before you start trying to restore the place.
Mm-hmm. And these vineyards you mentioned in that region, you said that you found some of them. And
Yeah.
And did you try the wine? And it was good?
Yeah, very good. It's very good wine.
And the Miller Thurgau, because I like this kind of wine, is available in that region?
It's available, yeah. But you can hardly find it in the wine shops in Prague. You have to go, for example, to Mielnik, where they have lots of wine stores, wine shops and so on. And there you can find lots of it. I think I've tried like from 7 or 8 different vineyards, and I like them all. I actually went there to buy for my release party in Stockholm, because you can't buy Bohemian wine on the market. I mean, no one sells it in Sweden, and you can't like order it. So I actually went there and bought it for the release party. And people were like astonished. They're like, wow, this is so good. Where can I buy it? Yeah, you have to go there.
Yeah, so I know some Moravian wine.
Yeah.
And this is exported and appreciated, I would say.
Yeah.
So that part of Czech is still neglected when it comes to wine production.
Yes, because in Moravia it's like the farms of Czechia, and they have like the tradition has been kept on. But Bohemia is like considered, it's like, steel and coal and so on, like wasteland, but they can't do that there, but they actually can. And it's a very, very deep tradition that they are trying to restore again. From old Saint Ludmilla was actually the first one in like 1,000 years ago, who brought the first like wine plant there and decided that I also want a vineyard.
I think one of the interviews I read or parts written about you, I read that you wrote that book because it happens near the border, and people living in this borderland are very special. They have different experience from people from inside the country, and that you come yourself from this kind of area.
Yes.
Yeah. What is the area you come from, and
yes.
Why is it so important for you?
Yes, I just noticed that those areas interest me, and I think that it might be that my family comes from borderland, and that's of course it's very different, but it's still this that it is borderland, and that is very far up north in Sweden. It's 1,000 kilometers, a bit more than 1,000 kilometers north of Stockholm, where now Sweden and Finland joins. Today it's a border between Sweden and Finland, close to Haparanda, and there's a river, and so where my mother grew up, it's on the river bank, and on the other side of the river it's Finland. So actually World War II was very close. I mean, otherwise Sweden wasn't in World War II, but there it was very close because we had Finland on the other side. And I mean, she has very strong memories, of course, from when Germany withdrew from Finland, or were chased out of Finland. They burned and bombed all the houses on the Finnish side of the border. So I mean, they saw the fires, they draw down the curtains for the bomb planes not to like take the wrong side of the river. And her first job was as an interpreter for the refugees who came over the river. And when my grandmother was young, it was Russia, before Finland was an independent country in 1917. It was Russia on the other side of the river. So, I mean, of course, that it does something to the people. It's different than if you live in the inland or inside the country. If you live on the border, you have everything is like related to the other side of the border. And in this case, it's also similar as it has been in Central Europe, because I mean, the village, it has been the same village on both sides of the river, because the river unites. I mean, they share the fish, everything. It's like, and the village has the same name on both sides of the river. And when they, like 200 years ago, decided to, when Russia defeated Sweden in the war, and they decided to just draw the line in the river, they also draw the line in the middle of a village. I mean, you've seen that, of course, a lot. And but I mean, it's still, we still have, I was there, I guess, last week, and we went over to the Finnish side, to the graveyard, and we have some relatives who lie there on the graveyard, because I mean, it's the same families that has been divided. Not maybe as brutal as in, like, with the Iron Curtain, but still. And it's, I think that borderlands are in a way more open. You're open to other people, to influences and everything, that because you always have to relate to it. You also have to relate to the other people. Can't let, you just can't think that we are the only people here and should remain that way.
Right.
So I think there are like special things that happens when you live on a border.
And again, this bilinguality, because the Finnish people near the border speak Swedish, right?
Yeah, some of them, not all. No, not. But the Swedish people speak Finnish, because the language up there was a minority language, and which is a kind of Finnish. So my relatives who have stayed there, they speak Finnish. I don't, because my mother left. So.
Although the language is so different from Swedish.
It's so different. It's possible to learn. You have to like get it from childhood, exactly. Almost. It's like Hungarian.
Yeah, it looks like they are from the same family, Finnish and Hungarian.
Yeah.
One of these post-Soviet countries.
Yeah.
I think the same family.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Strange language anyway.
So that sounds also fascinating. Do you think you can write a book about that, or with this kind of plot?
Yeah, I might. I have written one book from that area. That actually, it's about. Of course, I don't know the title in Polish now, but it is published in Poland. It's about. It's also a crime novel that takes place in present time, but it goes back to a history of my mother had a cousin. I found out this was also a story no one ever told, who went to the Soviet Union in 1930s to build what he believed would be paradise. Of course, it didn't turn out that way.
Which one is it? You can say the Swedish title.
I tystnaden begravd. I could look back here and see if I find the Polish.
Yeah, I think it is Grobowiec ciszy. Okay, I haven't read that. It was published by another publishing house.
Yes, it was.
So,
yes, it was.
Yeah, so I need to get it. And because
I check the title for you later. So it's also story in the present time, but a woman who goes back to that area and finds out that her grandfather was actually among those. Quite many who went to Russia or to the Soviet Union during the 1930s. And he disappeared, and now something happened. So there we are. He disappeared there, and it took like 60 years before they found out what happened to him. So that was, and he also left a pregnant woman behind. So it's also, most of my books are also like love stories. And so even though I dig into those big stories, I also wanted to be like a family story or a love story in the center. And this was actually a love story where he left his pregnant fiancée behind to go to Soviet Union and start building this paradise he believed in, which didn't turn out to be so paradistic. And the thing was that she would like join him afterwards, but it never happened. And I had exactly that story in my family, so I just like stole it and made a story out of it.
So your books are crime stories, but special crime stories because there is always the feelings as well, the story about the people. The heroes are presented with their own life problems,
Yeah.
regular problems. But there is a crime always.
Yes.
What made you choose this kind of subject, the crime?
Yeah, it was actually the first book I wrote, Women on the Beach, that chose it for me. I didn't have any plan to write crime stories. There were so many in Sweden who did that already. And I mean, I worked as an editor for Lisa Marklund, who was also my best friend, and I thought, well, now, why should I do this too? Everyone else does it. But when I started to dig into the stories of Women on the Beach, which actually was about people coming over, dying in the Mediterranean, floating ashore on the southern beaches of Europe, which is part of the story. But it wasn't until I was thinking about writing a novel, but it wasn't until I found the twist that made it into a crime novel or a thriller that it really became good. And then I kept on doing that, and it works very well. Crime stories it's about the crime, but it's also so much about finding the truth and dig into a hidden story that no one wants to talk about, and about what really happens behind the facades or under the surface. And people are not who they say they are. They're always hiding something. Maybe they are someone else. They change identity and so on. And all those things that are elements in the crime story are like elements in the stories I want to tell. So it works very well. And they're also very much about memory and lost memories, and to dig into this and to find out what happened, or what have we not been talking about, and what is the silence really about. So I just find that, and also the crime novel is very, I like it when it's, you got the tension and you have to turn to the next page to see what happens. It's very fun to write that way, and I like it because it also makes the books very available to lots of people. Everyone doesn't write crime stories, but everyone can do it. It's a very, very like equal form of literature. It's for everyone. You can be high educated or not. It doesn't matter. Women, men, everyone doesn't read them, but everyone can read them. And I like that. I like it to be like very public, very open to everyone, to like, no one should feel that they can't read my books. I like it that everyone can read them.
And do you like to read crime novels as well?
Yes, I do, but I read lots of other things too. I read a lot of novels, get lots of inspiration from other kind of novels. And of course, I write lots of nonfiction as well, not at least for the research. But I love to read a good crime story, and especially not when I'm not so interested in the crime actually, but that it can take you those who can really write it in a good way and take you to parts of the world where I haven't been. I read some fantastic crime stories from Nigeria recently, and from Hamburg in 1947. And there's a crime, but it's also about, traveling to that place and time and being there. And I think crime novels are fantastic in doing this. To Iceland, you can go. You can find books from everywhere and get into that society, but in an entertaining way. It's still entertaining, and you can read it in the bath and so.
Okay. And do you always do the research for the books?
Yes, I do a lot of research. I have to, as I said, as I have used in all those 5 novels, a little bit different in the one I'm working on now, but those 5 that I have written before, that have been published, they have like those themes from real world, from society, like this one, Sudetах. And of course, I have to know so much about it to be able to create the story, and to be able to choose what I shall write about, to be able to create the characters and get into the minds of them. I have to know all about the story and the place, but also what did you eat, what did you drink, how did you live your life, how I spent quite a lot of work on finding those ugly words in Sudetland. What could they say when they were really, really angry, or someone who really didn't mind the language? I wanted to be like someone could actually, recognize someone from that village from the way they, say bad words, ugly words. And so I do all this research. I start to do a little to create the story, and then I keep on doing more and more. And of course, as we talked about, to go to the places. And it helps me a lot. I go to the places, I walk all the streets and roads and woods that my characters walk, and I found the houses that I want them to live in. And sometimes I move the houses to another village and so on. In this book, I created a town that are like parts of different towns, and actually it's also an erased, wiped out town that doesn't exist anymore. In the book it exists, but the name of it is actually, I took from one of those cities that were erased from the map. And it helps me a lot. It's really fun to do that. I mean, I love it. It's so interesting. And it also helps me when I write that I have those photos of the houses. I know what they look like. I don't have to make them up. I can just move in.
So your books are fiction based on facts?
Yes. Yeah.
That's more interesting.
Hmm.
But do you still work as a journalist, or you just
no?
You just
I write the books full time now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And do you still write screenplays or plays?
No, not really. I've been working a little bit on the film scripts of my own books, or one of my books that are now being worked, and I worked with a little bit, but then other people can take over because I think it's more fun to get into a new story. I just have to have some fingers in it, but I've already written the book, so next time I want to write a new story. But I do that a little, but not that much. I focus on the books, I think.
So I guess you are
I'm better at that, and I really love it.
So I guess you are no longer the editor for Lisa Marklund's books.
No, not really. But we still read each other's drafts and so on. I just read the first third of her next book that will be published sometime. I don't know when. She's just started it, and then we read each other. She always read my books too, or my scripts, my drafts, very early on, and we discuss the characters and the stories, but not that I'm not that hard into it as I was with the whole Annika Bengtsson series when I was the editor. Mm-hmm. But it's great. It's great to you have to cooperate with some people that you can really connect with and who can really get deep into your characters and are interested in it. And
So if you do that much research, how long does it take you to write a book? Is it 2 years?
Oh yeah, like a book like Tunelu, it's at least 2 years. Mm-hmm. Because there's so much research, and there's also the hardest work is actually to turn all this research into a novel that should be rather easy to read. It should be light. You can't be too heavy with the research, because then you should write nonfiction. This is actually, it's a novel and a crime novel, so you have to keep the tension and so on, and to choose from this huge story about those 3 million people and this time of history and way back into the history of the German-speaking people in Bohemia. It's a 1,000-year-long history and so on. I have to just choose, it's just lots of it, just a few lines or something, but to choose those few lines or this situation or this character, I have to know all that. So it's really hard when you have to throw everything away and just it's just the core left.
So I guess you might be working on your new project. Am I right?
Yes. And now I actually did something else.
Something? Can you reveal some information about the new project?
It's actually, all of my former books have been taking place both in Sweden, but also in other countries abroad. They are very international. But this time I actually wanted to write a book that takes place only in Sweden. And it's a crime novel, and it takes place up north, not as far as my family are from. It's just halfway, it's just 500 kilometers in the middle of Norrland, as we say. And I have a house there, and spent all the summers there for like 20 years. And it's like this former industrial area that now is like countryside because the industries are gone. It's like huge, just huge woods. Sweden it's like the wood land of Sweden. So I wanted to place it there because there are lots of stories I wanted to tell about that. But it's actually, the crime story is just fiction. So for a change, it hasn't been that much of research. Because I was a bit tired after Sudetenland. It was so much to deal with. I thought I'd take a break and just write a crime novel and just place it there. So it will be released in Sweden in October.
Oh, so it's finished, right?
Yes, I was quick now. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that is submitted already to the publisher, and you just await the publishing, right?
Yes, I'm just waiting for the. I'm just proofreading it now. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, well, I keep the fingers.
And my agents will get you an English copy very soon, I guess.
So I hope so.
Yeah.
So, and do you think about the next project?
Yes, I do. I actually have like 4 books now to write, because I'm going to make this one into a little series. It's going to be 3 books. Okay. This one that I wrote now with the same characters, and it's also the first time that I actually have a police in the as main character. Otherwise, it has been those people who are involved in the story that like have to solve the crime as well. In a way, like in Tunnel, it's this Swedish couple and this Swedish woman that has to like find out what is this, what have happened here, especially as her husband gets suspected for the murder. But this time it's actually the police in the leading character, so that's a bit different. And then I have 2 novels that I'm working on. One like documentary novel that takes place in Stockholm during World War II, and another one that's based on my own family. So I have a lot to do for like 5 years.
You will dig back in the past again.
Yes.
The Second World War seems to be quite interesting subject, right?
Yes, it is. It is. And there are always new stories to tell. And I haven't done that in Stockholm, actually, where I live in Stockholm. And I haven't really written. Some of my books take place a bit in Stockholm, especially in the suburb where I grew up. One book takes place, but I haven't really like written about Stockholm history. So that would be quite fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because now when I realized most of the known Swedish books, apart from Stig Larsson's books, don't take place in Stockholm. In several small cities around.
Yes, almost every small city in Sweden or village has got a crime author nowadays. There are lots of them.
So now the time is to write back about Stockholm, right?
Yeah, that's well. But that will be the next one.
So this is good for you for the moment that you write about an area which is close to you. Because we can't travel that much because of the pandemic.
No, exactly. So, it was lucky that I chose this time, and an area that I know so much about. So I didn't, because for a long time we couldn't travel in Sweden either. So, but then I had made a little bit of research before Corona, and the rest I knew, so it wasn't a problem. I could just like text a friend for some details on. So that was lucky, and Corona has been in a way good for an author because you had just sit in your room. I mean, what could you do except from writing? Yeah.
So good, and I look forward to get this manuscript. I look forward to you coming to Poland when the pandemic is over. I hope
so.
And meet the readers and talk again about your present and future projects. And I thank you very much for this nice discussion, nice interview.
Thank you. And I love to come in person later on.
Thank you. And I wish you a lot of success with your next book, and and a good health, and especially for the pandemic times.
Yeah, you too.
A lot of strength and motivation.
Yeah. Thank you. I hope the Polish readers will enjoy it.
Yes. Yes, and again, I will show our readers the book we talked about, Ślepy, tunelu.
Yeah.
And my guest was Tove Alsterdal. Thank you very much, and have a good night tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.